listening, keep learning. The Tom Daniel Show. Keep listening, keep learning. The Tom Daniel Show.
You're listening to The Tom Daniel Show, and I'm your host, Tom Daniel. It's time for a banjo joke because, when is it not time for a banjo joke? How do you tune a banjo? No one knows. One of my favorite things to do here on The Tom Daniel Show is take a subject and pull out the core insights, connections, and things that maybe aren't immediately obvious. I never want to just record a dry lecture covering the surface area of some random concept. I want to reverse engineer the thing, take it apart, see how it ticks, and then put it back together again. I love taking complex topics and making them feel more accessible and hopefully more interesting too. So if you're into the intersection of music, language, culture, geography, and history, then this episode should be right up your alley. Today, I want to explore something that is fundamental to all American music. There's a common thread of musical DNA that runs through all American music, and it doesn't have anything to do with race, culture, geography, socioeconomic status, or anything else. It's called the Scotch snap. The Scotch snap is a signature sound of American music because it's found exclusively in the English language. Now, it doesn't matter if you're listening to old country or modern hip-hop, the Scotch snap is in there. And hopefully after this episode, you'll start to hear it differently. But I need to tell you one story in order to tell you another. The Czechoslovakian composer Antonín Dvořák moved to the United States in 1892, and he immersed himself in American music while composing his New World Symphony. And sometimes it's also called the Symphony for the New World, with New World being the European label for America. Now, he was trying to soak up American folk music for inspiration, so he listened to as much as he could find, and he listened as an outsider. Now, although Dvořák was fascinated and inspired by traditional Southern folk music, he complained that he simply couldn't tell the difference between Scottish folk music and African American folk music. Wait, what? Wait, let me get this straight. He heard African American folk music from the Deep South, and he thought it sounded Scottish? How could a professional musician and composer with a trained ear get those two things mixed up? That ought to completely flip your assumptions about the way 19th century music actually sounded. For example, the banjo is a phenomenon that in contemporary modern times is usually associated with poor country Southerners, hillbillies, rednecks, good old boys. But the history of the banjo is totally misunderstood. The banjo is actually a West African instrument. It was constructed from hollow gourds, animal skin, and sticks of wood. And the concept behind the banjo was brought over in the slave trade in the 17th century. Early slaves continued to make and play banjos. In fact, the word banjo itself is either a Bantu or a Mandinka word from Africa. They called it either banja or banju. Thomas Jefferson, a noted musician himself, called it the banjar in his notes on African American music. Now, more than likely, it was the Creole accent that permanently transformed the word into banjo. Now, something else to file away in the back of your mind for later is that Europeans had absolutely no frame of reference for the banjo. As far as they were concerned, it might as well have been a musical instrument from the moon. Nobody in Europe played the banjo. Now, probably the earliest known depiction of a banjo in American culture is a painting called The Old Plantation by John Rose from about 1790, and it depicts a slave string band. Now, in a string band, the instrumentation would vary, but it usually featured a fiddle, a banjo, and some percussion. African American string bands were very numerous and successful throughout the South in the 19th and even early 20th centuries, as they added guitar to the lineup. Therefore, up until World War II, the traditional sound of African American folk music always featured the sound of the banjo. Always. It was a major part of the core sound. Now, the great 20th century American composer William Grant Still even added a banjo to the orchestra in his 1930 composition, The Afro-American Symphony, because he was trying to represent the sound of authentic African American music of the time. That's what authentic African American folk music sounded like in the 19th century. I remember that poor composer, Dvorak, who couldn't tell Scottish folk music and African American folk music apart? Well, now that you know this, can you blame him? That's such a huge disconnect from today's image of the banjo. So if the banjo is a traditional African American instrument, how did it become associated with redneck good old boys? Now, the answer to that question comes from the rise of two popular styles of music in the 1940s, rhythm and blues and bluegrass. Rhythm and blues, also known as R&B, is a marketing term. It was coined by a record executive at Atlantic Records named Jerry Wexler to replace the term race music. Now, after World War II, race music charts in the American hit parade were dominated by a more urban and electric sound, and the newly named rhythm and blues ushered in a new era of black music. Now, keep in mind that although early jazz tunes did feature the banjo quite prominently, the sound simply vanished after World War II. The face of this new rhythm and blues music was Ray Charles, and the banjo disappeared from the new urban black sound altogether. Simultaneously, in the 1940s, another Southerner named Bill Monroe created a new style of country music called bluegrass, which was rooted in the old string band tradition. Now, in his band, Bill Monroe featured a young banjo pioneer named Earl Scruggs, who had invented a whole new way of playing the banjo with a three-finger roll style of picking. Now, before the arrival of Earl Scruggs, the usual way of playing the banjo was to either strum it with a pick or slap it in what was called a clawhammer style. Either way, the banjo was only thought of as an accompaniment instrument. Earl Scruggs transformed the banjo into a virtuoso lead solo instrument by using three fingers to pick the strings individually instead of strumming them. Practically anybody can strum a banjo in the old style, but you had to be a really great player to master the Earl Scruggs three-finger roll. Now, the rise of the Earl Scruggs style of banjo picking in bluegrass, coupled with an absence of the banjo sound from rhythm and blues, completed the swap of the banjo away from one culture and towards another. Now, from the 1940s on, the banjo became exclusively associated with country folks, pretty much completely erasing its earlier history in the public consciousness. Before 1940, the banjo was an African American instrument. After 1940, it was a country instrument. That's really an incredible cultural migration for a musical instrument. Now, I can't think of another instrument to do the same thing like that, just completely swap cultures. When I think of the accordion, for example, I realize that it was a traditional Balkan folk instrument that was adopted by Cajun, Zydeco, and Tejano music in the South, but the difference is that it is still associated with Balkan music. It didn't lose that. The accordion expanded its influence, while the banjo completely swapped cultures one for the other. That's totally fascinating to me. You're listening to The Tom Daniels Show. We'll be right back.
What are you waiting for? The Tom Daniels Show. What are you waiting for? The Tom Daniels
Well, welcome back to the Tom Daniels Show. Hey, give it up for my band, Mary Mac, the world's most perfect band. And you're going to hear from them again a little later. And it's time for another joke. What is a true Southern gentleman? That's someone who knows how to play the banjo, but doesn't. Now, we were talking about the banjo originally being a traditional African-American folk music sound, and how the composer Antonin Dvorak frequently confused African-American folk music of the 19th century with Scottish folk music. But banjo is only part of this story. Throughout human history, language has always had the most significant influence on music over anything else in the culture. The rhythms of music in every culture comes from the spoken language, and the Romance language cultures are no different. By the way, fun fact, the word romance comes from the word Roman, as in the Roman Empire. They spoke Latin in the Roman Empire, and all of the so-called Romance languages are based on Latin. For example, Spanish and Italian feature a repeated spoken rhythm that can be described as a 3 even syllables with an accent in the middle. Consider, for example, Spanish words like mañana. See, that's 3 syllables with the middle syllable accented, mañana. Or tostada, Ernesto, siempre. Or simple Spanish phrases like ¿qué pasa? Or de nada. They all have that same 3-syllable rhythm with the middle syllable getting the accent. Also, consider the Italian words amore, favore, bambino, signore, or simple Italian phrases like mi scusi or non posso. So much of Italian and Spanish feature this very same 3-syllable rhythm pattern, and it's the trademark sound of those languages. So it shouldn't be surprising that their music features that same sound as well. People don't talk like that because that's the way the music sounds. No, it's the opposite. The music sounds that way because that's how they talk. Romance language music sounds the way it does because of how people talk. Music is derived from the rhythm of the language. English, however, is not a Romance language. In English, we have a different signature rhythm that can be described as 2-syllable rhythm pattern, where the first syllable is accented and short. Consider English words like this: jumping, 2 syllables. The first one is short and accented, jumping. Playing, uncle. Basic, Peter. Bonnie, bloody, mama. Or phrases like want it, got it, get up. That is a signature English language sound that's not found in other languages around the world. Musically, it can either be called the Lombard rhythm or it can be called the Scotch snap. The Scotch snap is an identifiable and unique rhythm heard noticeably in a type of Scottish folk dance called a strathspey. And here's an example of a strathspey recorded in 1915 and housed in the Library of Congress. See if you can hear it. Now, I also asked Mary Mac to create an original song for this episode that features the Scotch snap. And here's what they came up with.
1, 2, people! Piping hot, whiskey dram, rather not. Jumping, playing, mama, bonnet, bloody, basic, Uncle Peter, want it, got it, give it, get up, want it, got it, give it, get up.
Okay, I'm just going to go right ahead and say it out loud. I don't deserve Mary Mac. Good grief, I don't. I don't deserve them. They are too good. I simply asked Rip to create a song featuring Scotch snap rhythms, and I gave him a list of sample words. So they took that gibberish list of words and actually gave them meaning, all while singing them in a Scotch snap rhythm and putting the Scotch snap in the banjo. Man, I think they invented a new style of music completely in the process. I mean, Rip, what would you even call that? I mean, is it like Southern Strathspey? Wow, that's just too perfect. Man, that's too good. Anyway, in 2011, a father and son research team, Nicholas Temperley and David Temperley, analyzed 100 hymn tunes from 4 cultures: English, Scottish, German, and Italian. And they counted the number of times a Scotch snap rhythm occurred in each tune. Now, that's 400 total tunes. Now, in both the English and Scottish hymn tunes, 2/3 of all songs contained at least one Scotch snap. In the German and Italian songs, 0. Not one single example of a Scotch snap in 200 songs. Why is that? Because the Scotch snap is unique to English, and you'll find it in English-speaking cultures and English culture music. However, it's not found at all in German or the Romance languages, since none of those languages contain a Scotch snap in their speech pattern. So if it's not in the speech, it's not in the music. Remember, the music sounds that way because that's how people talk, and the Scotch snap rhythms are prominent in spiritual music, gospel, country, rock, funk, even hip-hop. There's a Dusty Springfield song from the 60s called Wishin' and Hopin'. And when you listen to that song, think about Scotch snaps. American music is an English-speaking art, and every genre of American music is loaded with Scotch snaps. Now, in 1800, the U.S. population was 80% British, and up until 1890, well over half of all immigrants to the United States were from England, Scotland, Wales, or Ireland. Also, a significant number of the Scots-Irish immigrants managed to find their way to Appalachia, especially after the England-Scotland Union of 1707 and the Jacobite rebellions. Now, in 1916, during World War I, British musicologist Cecil Sharp concluded that there were more English folk tunes to be found in Appalachia than in England. Now, there's no question that Appalachian folk music is loaded with Scots-Irish influence. And while the population demographics of Appalachia featured Scots-Irish immigrants and descendants, the black population of the South was focused along the coastal regions called the Tidewater and the plantations. There was a wide, collar-shaped buffer zone in between Appalachia and the Tidewater. That's where Scots-Irish whites lived and blended their culture with African slaves. This overlap and coexistence of Scots-Irish and African culture lasted for over 200 years in the South, and all in an English-speaking environment. And that's the very reinforced concrete foundation of all modern American music. This is the critical blend of cultures that I speak about so often. This is where African music and Celtic music became Southern music. And the Scotch snap is the shared musical vocabulary of the South, regardless of racial background or tradition where they came from. Scottish music already had the Scotch snap, and since African American music was based in the English language, it couldn't help but pick up the Scotch snap too, and on and on and on. Every love child of every genre of American music passed that same Scotch snap down to its musical descendants. And it's not just history, hiding in old musty folk tunes, but it continues to flourish to this day. In fact, one of the current trademark sounds found in rap and hip-hop music today is that good old Scotch snap. I mean, it's all over the place. And if you know what to listen for, it's easy to find in any genre that you listen to. I mean, just listen to some Elvis, Louis Armstrong, Muddy Waters, Hank Williams, Earl Scruggs, James Brown, Leonard Skinner, Scott Joplin, Gucci Mane, Bob Wills, Ray Charles, Willie Nelson, every other musician you can think of, and you'll easily hear the Scotch snap, regardless of genre. So this seemingly simple rhythmic pattern, born from the English language and forged in that very specific extended cultural blending zone in the South, is a fundamental, pervasive piece of American musical DNA. It connects sounds you might have thought were worlds apart. So why does knowing about the banjo's real history or this Scotch snap thing even matter? I mean, all you're trying to do is just enjoy some music, right? Because that changes how you listen, doesn't it? It shows you what might seem like totally distinct genres and styles aren't isolated from each other. They're deeply connected and products of a shared history, a shared geography, and even shared rhythms of the language. Understanding this lets you hear the echoes, the common ground across the vast landscape of American music. It just adds layers to your listening experience. And of course, it's cultural appropriation. Of course it is. Culture couldn't exist without cultural appropriation. And now that you've maybe got a new ear for that subtle pattern and the historical journey behind it, how else might paying closer attention to the historical roots in the music you love reveal surprising connections you never noticed before? What other hidden threads are just waiting to be discovered simply by listening a little differently? And what's a banjo player's favorite sandwich? Anything with a pickle. Thank you, everybody. This has been the Tom Daniels Show. Keep listening. Keep learning.
Keep listening, keep learning. The Tom Daniel Show. Keep listening, keep learning. The Tom Daniel Show. Take a break from your usual